Welcome back, chess friends, to 1834, where McDonnell and Labourdonnais are playing their unofficial World Chess Championship. We also have Paul Morphy up here in 1859 providing some commentary. The score so far is 7-2 to Labourdonnais. I've got, because there are no known images of McDonnell, I've got Father Dougal standing in for him, another famous Irishman, of course, and I've got Zero Mostel standing in for Labourdonnais because I've only been able to find hand drawings of Labourdonnais. So now that the introduction's out of the way, let's get stuck into game 14. McDonnell starts with e4, Labourdonnais replies with c5, the Sicilian, and as we know by now, McDonnell likes to play the McDonnell attack with f4. So we've seen moves very similar or the same as the next few moves, like maybe in a slightly different order sometimes, but we have seen them before, so let's just zap through them. We have e6, knight to f3, d5, e5, knight to c6, c3, f6, knight to a3, knight to h6, and moving this knight again to c2, and then queen to b6 nice and early. And McDonnell goes d4, trying to lock up the centre here. And now Labourdonnais plays bishop to d7, and McDonnell decides to move this knight a third time, instead of developing one of his bishops, for example. He plays knight to e3. And Morphy comments, he says, premature. Surely bishop to e2 or bishop to d3 would have been better play. And the engine agrees with him. The engine likes bishop to d3, but that's not what McDonnell played. He played knight to e3. And how does Labourdonnais go forwards with this? Well, he just captures d4, and then we have captures on d4, bishop to b4 with check, and now McDonnell doesn't want to, for example, block with the bishop, because this will block the defense of the pawn here, and Labourdonnais got two attackers on it. So instead he goes king to f2, getting out of the check and heading towards the king side. And now a good move here for Labourdonnais would be to capture the pawn here, because captures and then castles, it reveals the rook, putting a lot of pressure on the king side here, x-raying the king. But Labourdonnais doesn't do this, he just castles straight away. And then again, for McDonnell, capturing on f6 would have been better, because we would have had, for example, rook captures, and then he can push this pawn here, and now the king's looking much more secure than he will look after the moves that are actually played. So after castles, what McDonnell actually does is king to g3, and then we have captures and captures, and bishop to e8, trying to get his bishop to a nicer position around his blocking pawns here. And we have king to h3, bishop to h5, g4, trying to get rid of this bishop, and the bishop goes back to g6, bishop to g2 from McDonnell, bishop to e4, so digging right into the kingside position now. We've got these not the pawn. We've got the bishop pointing at the corner, and we've got the rook going down the middle here, and we've got the knight on this pawn and on this square. So a whole lot of action on McDonnell's king side here, which doesn't look too comfortable. But okay. McDonnell pushes his pawn to g5, threatening the knight, which moves to f5, and McDonnell decides maybe exchanging off the knights would give him a little bit more breathing space, so he does that, and the rook comes to f5. And McDonnell now has the chance to try to develop his bishop to a better square, so he goes for e3, although it is looking a little bit blocked in by his own centre pawns on the same colour squares. Bourdonnais decides, I like this exchanging off pieces idea, so he grabs the knight with the bishop, and McDonnell captures back, and Labourdonnais spots something here. He decides that he is able to capture this pawn with the knight, which he does. Now McDonnell doesn't feel like he wants to capture this knight here, because it would reveal the queen attacking the bishop, and then all sorts of cramped nastiness going on here. So McDonnell decides not to capture the knight. He moves his bishop out of its attack instead, because it's attacked by two pieces. He moves it to here on g4, and Labourdonnais just captures it anyway. McDonnell captures back with the queen, finally developing the queen, you notice. Labourdonnais continues the game by bringing his second rook over to f8, where it joins its friend, and they both look up and down this f-file together, looking very mean indeed. McDonnell responds to this by bringing his own rook to g1 to try to help out with the defence, and Bourdonnais brings his bishop back to d6, where it's on a diagonal that's even closer to the king. This move from b4 as well means that the queen is now threatening this pawn. And it seems like McDonnell really likes this pawn, so he brings his bishop back to c1 to defend it. But what he didn't defend against was, of course, rook to f3 check. And McDonnell doesn't want to bring his rook back to block, because the bishop will just pick it up and he'll be down material. But in all honesty, by this time, there doesn't seem to be really any good moves left for McDonnell. So what he does play is king to h4. But of course, this means that it walks straight into the rook on f8 to f4, pinning the queen. And it was at this point that McDonnell decided enough was enough, and he said, "I resign, Labourdonnais, you're better than me in this game, congratulations, enjoy your point." And Labourdonnais goes up 8 games to 2, so doing very well indeed. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of fun tonight, drinking and gambling with all his friends. Spare a thought for McDonnell, though, he's trying his best. So why did he resign in this position? Well, if we'd have continued with the bishop captures, and then the rook captures, the queen captures, and then the bishop captures, we end up with a queen and a bishop against 2 rooks. And how many pawns do they have? 6 pawns against 5. So black is looking extremely powerful in this position, and McDonnell is, of course, right to give up when he did. So thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time for game 15. And one last thing, I nearly forgot, there was one more comment from Morphy after the last move. He said, "The game is capitally played from first to last by Labourdonnais, but very indifferently by his antagonist." So with that, I'll see you next time.